So in this first piece of this POGIL activity, so you guys are going to need to print out a copy of this basics of solutions POGIL. One that I use for both advanced chem and AP Chem, so it says up here advanced chemistry basics. But I think at least the first majority of this POGIL is really nice for regular chemistry also. So we're just going to go ahead and use it. What we're going to discuss in this first piece is what is solubility and how do we actually calculate solubility. Very simple to do, you guys will see. Should be no issue with this first piece of it. So what it's asking you to do, remember solubility is some measurement of how much of the solute will dissolve in the solvent. And so typically it's trying to find a maximum number, like what's the most amount of um, HCl, of hydrochloric acid, that'll dissolve in a pint of water or something like that. That would be what's known as the solubility. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and find the solubility of sodium chloride, so of table salt, if you will, in water. So we conducted 3 experiments here that you guys are going to be analyzing. And I'll help you with it just a little bit, but I want you guys to kind of work through it. Again, you can work with other people in your POGIL group, either work through it yourself, compare answers with them, make sure you guys are agreeing, or better yet, if you can figure out a way to get together on Google Meets or something like that and actually work through it, I think that would be awesome. So here we go. What you're doing is you're taking some table salt and you're adding it to water at 20 degrees Celsius, and you're stirring it the same number of times. And then, we did this, 3 different times, if you will. We had a first experiment, second experiment, third experiment. In experiment number 1, we had just 10 grams of water, and we were adding salt 1 gram at a time and watching it dissolve. Same in experiment 2, except this time we started with 20 grams of water. And then in experiment number 3, we started with 50 grams of water. And so what this is measuring here is how much NaCl we added in this column and how much NaCl actually dissolved. And so you guys are going to go ahead and sort of analyze that data. Okay, so question 1 is asking what variables were kept constant, and there's a couple of them up here you'll see in the description in table 1 as to what was held constant. And then in all 3 experiments, something interesting happens with the sodium chloride as far as how much of it's dissolving. And so you should be looking to see about that and explain kind of what you're seeing there in question number 3 right here. Okay, before we move on to question number 4 then, number 3, or after number 3, it's giving us some definitions, and I think you guys know most of these from the previous lecture that I gave you guys. The 2 that I want you to pay particular attention to is this term saturation. And what does saturation mean? So what does it mean to be saturated, and what does it mean to be unsaturated? Okay, so you guys probably already knew kind of the basic idea here, which is if a solution is saturated, that means it will not dissolve any more of the solvent. I'm sorry, of the solute. And if a solution is unsaturated, that means it could dissolve more of the solute. Okay, and so we tend to categorize solutions as either saturated or unsaturated. And those 2 kinds of solutions behave differently. And so we'll be talking about that in the second and third portions of this POGIL activity. But in this first one, we just want to recognize when a solution is saturated and when it's unsaturated. Okay, so you guys will be doing that here by looking at the table and determining which solutions are unsaturated, right? Which solutions could you put more solute into? Could the water still break apart some more solute, and which ones are unsaturated? And so you can be doing that in questions 4 through 7 here, if you will. Now, in this last piece here, then we're going to try and go ahead and figure out what the solubility is. So what we're going to do is try and figure out, remember solubility measures, what's the number, what's the amount of solute I could get to dissolve into the solvent, and it usually measures a maximum. So what's the maximum amount of solute I could get to dissolve in the solvent? And so you're going to use the data up here in the table in order to figure that out, because you know how much solvent you have, right? In experiment 1 it was 10 grams, experiment 2 it was 20 grams, experiment 3 it was 50 grams. And in each case, you're going to figure out what's the maximum amount of sodium chloride I got to dissolve in that water. And so from that, you ought to be able to figure out what the solubility of sodium chloride in water is. And so you're going to do that for each one of the experiments. And then kind of take a look at how those things are related to each other. So you're going to find there is a relationship between what got dissolved in experiment 1, what got dissolved in experiment 2, and what got dissolved in experiment 3. So that's what I want you guys to do in this first piece. So you go all the way through and stop right here at this stop sign after you've finished up through 16. I don't want you to move on yet because I want to talk a little bit more about what it means to be an unsaturated solution and what it means to be a saturated solution, and what are some basic units of concentration, because we're going to have to deal with that here when we get to model number 2. So there you go. That shouldn't take you guys very long to get that, that first piece done.